All right, so back at it again. This one, I wanted to show you more of hair and then just some details. On the right side over here, I'll stick more to the watercolor paint kind of palette set. On the left side, I'll be showing some detail with more of like colored pencils or the watercolor colored pencils. So I did paint in like a layer of the hair on both sides. I used basically just the black with some orange to do kind of like a brown. And then I also painted in the same color with the eyes, like a dark brown with just a little bit of black around it. For the lips, I did basically just red, number 2 with a little bit of black. And then I added a touch of this kind of fuchsia-ish magenta type color, the 13. Just a little bit on the top lip. All right, so those are the base colors I started with. I would recommend starting off with a base. And basically everything you do, or the painting. On this left side, going to look at the lip color. I'm going to start with just some darker red. So I'm using the same colors I just mentioned, the red, dot of black, and then a touch of kind of magenta, 13. Let me try it out on scratch paper. Looks a little more brown to me, so I'm going to add a little bit more red to it. All right, that color looks better to me. So again, you can get fine lines with the brush. If it comes to a point, again, make sure your brush is wet. I'm going to start pulling up just a few lines. The lip. A little bit in the middle. That also coming down. Alright, so that looks pretty rough. I'm going to clean off my brush. Clean off a little bit of that excess water. And just soften the lines a little bit. And seeing those little spots I did on top, I'm going to kind of move out. And you do lose the lines a little bit, but you can always repaint those in. Let me go ahead and just blend the top. Should be darker. So they're still a little too harsh. I'm going to soften them still. Alright. And you come back in with a dark brown. So I'm just using the black for the 12 and then a little bit of the 16. Come into the middle of the lip. I'm painting this line here. A little bit of a shadow. Shadow here too. Just pulling some of that shadow up a little bit. Just a little bit below. I cleaned off my brush a little bit and I'm just softening up the bottom lip. Another thing I noticed was I was kind of losing the shape up here. So I'm going to go back to that slightly darker red. Bring back that top shape a little bit. All right. So I would continue on there. Pulling in some darker values from the center. Now I'm just using black. And then continue building up there. I'm going to just switch to the left side because you can do this similar thing with the watercolor pencils. Using the dark brown right now. I might have it back. Yeah, I'd be careful not to go straight to the black. Don't get everything too dark. But I'll add just a touch of. I switched over to black just to darken it up a little bit. Add some shadow here. It is a little easier to do the lines here. And a little bit of shadow first. And just more shadow on top. So as with the colored pencil, I used a little bit of black in the center and then the darker brown. Or just as brown on the colored pencil. Go in and soften it. Again, I don't have any paint on my brush, it's just slightly wet. And that'll move around the darker colors there. I'd actually have to let it dry more, and then I can go back in to add like the little lines in the lip. That part I do think is easier with the colored pencil. Once I let this dry, I can go back in here too with just the brush if it's at a point. The brush is barely touching the paper. Starting to pull in these lines right here. So again, it's a similar thing here. I can do it with the colored pencil too. And then let me switch over to just the eyes. Actually, the hair. So her hair is kind of wavy here. So what I would do, I have the base color. Again, I just used the black with like a little bit of orange, so kind of like a dark brown. And then I'm going to go in and just kind of start with these base, like larger lines that I see in here. And I'm using a dark brown. So again, make sure they are kind of wavy. You don't want to add all the hair strokes going vertically like that up and down because it'll look pretty flat. Hair sticking out here. But I'll kind of pause there for now. If there's any really dark areas like here, you can kind of square off that shape. So it's or kind of mark off that shape. Get a little bit of black. This part you do have to kind of practice getting slightly wet brush to a point, getting your color. It's too much water. If it gets too thick like that, you can always tap it with the paper towel. So it's going to be a lot of those lines. You're also going to want them, or some of them, a little bit darker so you can actually see them. And again, my brush is barely touching the paper, and then I'm just pulling the brush. And again, I don't want to just do all these round lines like this, unless their hair is really like that. But all these curved lines, I also want to go back in and make some areas a little thicker, show more of the shadow. Your hairs aren't all usually uniform, like going in the same direction or angle, so I can bring in to break up that shape a little bit. A few other hairs kind of sticking out. So as you can see, hair is going to take a while to develop with just the paint. But you can continue doing that with that method. The left side. So that's the brown, and actually switch to the black. Just a darker shadow here. So I usually do the darker part that has the shadow. Looks a little more solid. And usually from that part, you have this darker part, and then the hairs, you can see it come out. Make sure your colored pencil is pretty sharp. And then try to look at your picture as much as possible, because otherwise you'll get kind of stuck doing it all in the same direction again. I do that sometimes when, just like in the zone, I'll keep doing it the same way and then it looks flat again. So I also need to remind myself to constantly look at the picture so I can see some of those larger hair shapes. Her hair's not all black, so I'm going to switch over to brown. I'm going to also throw in a little bit of orange because she has some lighter streaks. It's not exactly orange, but it'll help to lighten some of those areas up a little bit. And it's kind of just that, just constantly looking at the picture back and forth. You have it on your screen or on your phone. Always looking back at it. For this one, you are smoothing it out with watercolor. I would suggest not doing it everywhere. So again, I just have my brush and water. Tap it on my paper towel so it's not dripping. And I'm just gonna be a little more selective about where I smooth areas out. You can see it looks a little bit darker, those areas. All right. And then I would kind of keep going back and forth. So then I'd add another layer, my black, brown, maybe yellows, oranges, add a little bit of water, the brush, and then kind of go back and forth. If I'm starting off this way too, I can always go back in and add some more lines on top of it once I'm done. You can also do this with thin Sharpie. The only thing with the Sharpie is that it'll come out slightly different than the paint. So it's usually a little more bold. So again, if you're not careful, it'll look kind of like an outline. Sometimes that doesn't look too bad because I was kind of going light. But those are a couple tools you can use. The colored pencils on top of it. You can just use the brush or like a Sharpie for those textures. All right.